Rain lashed down, the relentless downpour turning the city into a blur of shadows and reflections. Each drop exploded against the grimy pavement of the Tokyo alleyway, creating a symphony of splashes that echoed through the narrow passage. Kairo gasped, his eyes snapping open as the cold rain soaked through his clothes. He lay sprawled amidst overflowing bins and discarded cardboard, the rough texture of the ground pressing against his back. The stench of wet garbage filled his nostrils, a pungent reminder of his dismal surroundings. Disoriented, he pushed himself up, his muscles protesting with every movement. His hand instinctively flew to his throbbing head, the pain a sharp contrast to the numbing cold of the rain. He winced, memories a swirling vortex of darkness. Where was he? How had he gotten here? The questions buzzed in his mind like angry bees, but no answers came. His gaze fell to his hand, and his breath hitched. An intricate, glowing mark pulsed on the back of his hand, a network of lines that seemed to writhe like living vines. The light pulsed in sync with a dull ache spreading through his body. It was as if the mark itself was a beacon, radiating an unknown energy that both terrified and intrigued him. He had never seen anything like it before, and the sight filled him with a mix of awe and dread. A guttural snarl ripped through the air, snapping Kairo out of his daze. His heart skipped a beat as he turned towards the source of the sound. Two hulking figures emerged from the shadows, their eyes gleaming with a predatory hunger. Their bodies seemed to ripple with unnatural energy, their outlines blurring at the edges as if they were not entirely solid. Fear, raw and primal, jolted through Kairo. He scrambled back, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He had no idea who these people were or what they wanted, but their menacing aura screamed danger. His instincts screamed at him to run, to disappear back into the labyrinthine alleys of Tokyo. Kairo, his breath catching in his throat, pushed himself to his feet and ran. The rain pounded against his face as he sprinted through the maze of alleys, his footsteps splashing through puddles. The glowing mark on his hand seemed to pulse faster, the light growing brighter with each step. He could hear the heavy footsteps of the figures behind him, their snarls growing louder. Panic surged through him, fueling his desperate flight. He had to find a way out, a place to hide, anything to escape the relentless pursuit. As he rounded a corner, he spotted a narrow gap between two buildings. Without hesitation, he squeezed through, the rough edges scraping against his skin. He emerged into a small courtyard, the rain-soaked ground glistening under the dim light of a flickering street lamp. He pressed himself against the wall, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The glowing mark on his hand continued to pulse, the light casting eerie shadows on the walls. He could hear the figures searching for him, their voices low and menacing. Kairo knew he couldn't stay hidden for long. He had to keep moving, had to find a way to lose them. The rain continued to fall, the sound a constant reminder of the storm that raged both outside and within him. Summoning every ounce of strength, he pushed off the wall and darted towards the far end of the courtyard. The alley beyond was even darker, the shadows deeper and more foreboding, but he had no choice. He had to keep running. The figures were close behind, their presence a constant threat. Kairo's mind raced, searching for any possible escape route. The glowing mark on his hand seemed to guide him, the light flickering in response to his thoughts. He turned another corner, his legs burning with the effort. The alley opened up into a wider street, the neon lights of the city casting a surreal glow on the wet pavement. He could see people in the distance, oblivious to his plight. Desperation clawed at him as he sprinted towards the crowd. He hoped that the presence of others would deter his pursuers, that the anonymity of the city would swallow him whole. But the figures were relentless, their pursuit unwavering. Kairo's breath came in short, painful bursts as he pushed through the throng of people. The glowing mark on his hand was now a beacon, drawing curious glances from those he passed. He had to keep moving, had to find a place to hide. He ducked into another alley, the noise of the crowd fading behind him. The rain continued to fall, the sound a constant companion. He could hear the figures closing in, their footsteps echoing off the walls. Kairo's mind raced, searching for any possible escape route. The glowing mark on his hand seemed to guide him, the light flickering in response to his thoughts. He had to keep running, had to find a way to lose them. The alley twisted and turned, a labyrinth of shadows and rain. Kairo's legs burned with the effort, but he couldn't stop. He had to keep moving, had to find a way out. He could hear the figures closing in, their footsteps echoing off the walls. Panic surged through him, fueling his desperate flight. He had to find a way out, a place to hide, anything to escape the relentless pursuit. Kairo, his breath catching in his throat, pushed himself to his feet and ran. The rain pounded against his face as he sprinted through the maze of alleys, his footsteps splashing through puddles. The glowing mark on his hand seemed to pulse faster, the light growing brighter with each step. The alley twisted and turned, a dizzying maze of concrete and steel. Rain slicked the ground, making his every step treacherous and slippery. Behind him, the heavy thud of footsteps echoed, drawing closer. Kairo risked a glance over his shoulder. The two figures were gaining on him, their expressions twisted in grotesque snarls. He pushed himself harder, his lungs burning with exertion and fear. He had no idea where he was going, but any direction was better than facing those things. The alley opened into a wider street, the neon lights of Tokyo reflecting off the wet asphalt. Cars splashed through puddles, their horns blaring in a discordant symphony. Kairo dodged pedestrians, his heart hammering against his ribs. He could hear the creatures behind him, their growls a terrifying counterpoint to the city's cacophony. He ducked down a side street, hoping to lose himself in the maze of smaller alleys, but they were relentless, their pursuit unwavering. He could feel their presence closing in, their energy a palpable weight pressing down on him. Panic surged through Kairo, threatening to overwhelm him. He had to get away, had to find somewhere to hide. But where could he go? As he ran, fragmented memories flickered through Kairo's mind. Each step he took seemed to trigger another fragment, another piece of a puzzle he couldn't quite grasp. The images were fleeting, like shadows dancing at the edge of his vision, taunting him with their elusiveness. He could feel the weight of these memories pressing down on him, a heavy burden that made his heart race even faster. The air around him was thick with tension, every sound amplified in the silence of the night. His breath came in ragged gasps, each one a struggle as he pushed himself to keep moving forward. A pair of startlingly white eyes, wide with fear, and something akin to recognition. They seemed to pierce through the darkness, locking onto him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. He couldn't shake the feeling that those eyes knew him, that they had seen into the depths of his soul and found something wanting. The fear in those eyes mirrored his own, a reflection of the terror that gripped him. It was as if they were a window into his own mind, showing him the fear he tried so hard to suppress. A wooden shrine, its ornate roof collapsing in a shower of sparks and splintered wood. The sight was both beautiful and tragic, a symbol of something sacred being torn apart. The shrine had once been a place of peace and reverence, but now it was a ruin, a testament to the destruction that had befallen it. The sparks flew like fireflies in the night, illuminating the darkness for brief moments before fading away. The sound of the wood splintering was like a cry of agony, a final lament for what had been lost. A voice, raspy and urgent, whispering the words, "The vessel," as darkness closed in. The whisper seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, echoing in his mind like a haunting melody. It was a voice he had heard before, in his dreams and his nightmares, always calling to him with the same urgency. The words sent a shiver down his spine, filling him with a sense of dread. The darkness around him seemed to grow thicker, closing in on him like a suffocating blanket. He could feel the weight of the words pressing down on him, a heavy burden that he couldn't escape. The images were disjointed, their meaning elusive, but they filled him with a chilling certainty that he was in more danger than he could have ever imagined. Each memory was like a piece of a puzzle, but the picture they formed was one of horror and despair. He could feel the fear building inside him, a cold knot in his stomach that tightened with each passing moment. The certainty of his danger was like a dark cloud hanging over him, casting a shadow on everything he did. He knew he had to keep moving to find a way out of this nightmare, but the path ahead was shrouded in darkness. These memories, these whispers of the past, held the key to his current predicament. He could feel it in his bones, a deep-seated knowledge that these fragments were more than just random images. They were clues, pieces of a larger puzzle that he had to solve if he wanted to survive. The whispers of the past were like a guiding hand, leading him through the darkness, but the path they showed was fraught with danger, and he knew that one wrong step could be his last. He had to be careful, to tread lightly and keep his wits about him, but how? He stumbled, his ankle twisting beneath him. The pain was immediate and intense, shooting up his leg like a bolt of lightning. He could feel the ground rushing up to meet him, the impact jarring his entire body. The world around him seemed to spin, a dizzying blur of shadows and light. He tried to catch himself, to regain his balance, but it was no use. The pain was too much, and he could feel his strength slipping away. He knew he had to keep moving, but his body was betraying him, refusing to obey his commands. Pain shot up his leg, sending him crashing to the ground. The impact knocked the wind out of him, leaving him gasping for breath. He could feel the rough pavement beneath him, the cold seeping into his bones. The pain was a constant, throbbing presence, a reminder of his vulnerability. He tried to push himself up, to get back on his feet, but his body refused to cooperate. The pain was too much, and he could feel his strength slipping away. He knew he had to keep moving, but his body was betraying him, refusing to obey his commands. He looked back, his breath catching in his throat. The sight of the two figures at the end of the alley sent a fresh wave of fear through him. They were getting closer, their silhouettes stark against the neon glow of the city. He could see the determination in their movements, the relentless pursuit that left him no room for escape. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat a reminder of the danger he was in. He knew he had to keep moving, to find a way out of this nightmare, but the path ahead was shrouded in darkness. The two figures stood at the end of the alley, their silhouettes stark against the neon glow of the city. They were like shadows, dark and menacing, their presence a constant threat. He could feel their eyes on him, watching his every move. The alley seemed to close in around him, the walls pressing in on him from all sides. He knew he had to find a way out, but the path ahead was shrouded in darkness. The neon lights cast eerie shadows, making it hard to see where he was going. He could feel the fear building inside him, a cold knot in his stomach that tightened with each passing moment. They were close, too close. He could feel their presence like a weight on his shoulders, a constant reminder of the danger he was in. The fear was almost overwhelming, a suffocating blanket that threatened to smother him. He knew he had to keep moving, to find a way out of this nightmare, but the path ahead was shrouded in darkness. The figures were relentless, their pursuit unyielding. He could feel their eyes on him, watching his every move. The fear was almost overwhelming, a suffocating blanket that threatened to smother him. Kairo tried to scramble back to rise and run again. His body was screaming in protest, every muscle aching with the effort. The pain in his ankle was a constant, throbbing presence, a reminder of his vulnerability. He could feel the rough pavement beneath him, the cold seeping into his bones. The fear was almost overwhelming, a suffocating blanket that threatened to smother him. He knew he had to keep moving to find a way out of this nightmare, but the path ahead was shrouded in darkness. The figures were relentless, their pursuit unyielding. He could feel their eyes on him, watching his every move. But his ankle throbbed in protest, and a wave of dizziness washed over him. The world around him seemed to spin, a dizzying blur of shadows and light. He tried to catch himself, to regain his balance, but it was no use. The pain was too much, and he could feel his strength slipping away. He knew he had to keep moving, but his body was betraying him, refusing to obey his commands. The dizziness was overwhelming, a suffocating blanket that threatened to smother him. He could feel the fear building inside him, a cold knot in his stomach that tightened with each passing moment. He was trapped. Desperation clawed at him, a cold terror settling in his gut. The fear was almost overwhelming, a suffocating blanket that threatened to smother him. He knew he had to keep moving, to find a way out of this nightmare, but the path ahead was shrouded in darkness. The figures were relentless, their pursuit unyielding. He could feel their eyes on him, watching his every move. The fear was almost overwhelming, a suffocating blanket that threatened to smother him. He was trapped, with no way out. He was out of time, out of options. The fear was almost overwhelming, a suffocating blanket that threatened to smother him. He knew he had to keep moving to find a way out of this nightmare, but the path ahead was shrouded in darkness. The figures were relentless, their pursuit unyielding. He could feel their eyes on him, watching his every move. The fear was almost overwhelming, a suffocating blanket that threatened to smother him. He was out of time, with no way out. A flash of crimson cut through the air, a blur of motion too fast for Kairo to follow. The night was thick with tension, the kind that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. Kairo's heart raced as he tried to make sense of the chaos unfolding before him. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth, and the metallic tang of blood, a stark reminder of the danger that lurked in the shadows. He could barely make out the shapes of the creatures pursuing him, their forms shifting and flickering like shadows in a nightmare. Just when he thought he couldn't run any further, a figure descended from above, landing gracefully between him and the creatures. A figure landed gracefully between him and the pursuing creatures, her back to him, a crimson katana gleaming in her hand. The blade seemed to hum with a life of its own, casting an eerie crimson glow that cut through the darkness. She stood as a barrier, a protector, her presence exuding a calm yet fierce determination. Kairo could feel the shift in the air, the creatures hesitating at the sight of her. It was as if she had drawn a line in the sand, daring them to cross it. She stood tall and proud, her stance radiating an air of quiet confidence that belied the danger of the situation. Her movements were fluid, almost like a dance, each step measured and precise. Kairo couldn't help but be mesmerized by her, the way she seemed to command the very air around her. It was clear that she was no ordinary warrior. There was something almost otherworldly about her. Kairo watched, mesmerized, as she turned her head slightly, revealing a cascade of midnight black hair and eyes that blazed with an inner fire. Her gaze was intense, piercing through the darkness and locking onto the creatures with a ferocity that made Kairo's breath catch in his throat. There was a story in those eyes, a history of battles fought and won, of sacrifices made and burdens carried. He felt a strange sense of connection to her, as if their fates were somehow intertwined. A crimson mark, similar in design to his own but radiating a fiery energy, pulsed on her cheekbone. It was a symbol of power, of a bond that transcended the physical realm. Kairo's own mark seemed to respond to it, a faint warmth spreading across his skin. He wondered what it meant, this shared mark, and what it signified about their connection. The mark seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat, a living testament to the power she wielded. "You're in my way," her voice was low and steady, laced with a thread of steel. It was a voice that brooked no argument, that demanded obedience. Kairo felt a shiver run down his spine at the sound of it. There was a strength in her words, a resolve that was unshakable. She was a force to be reckoned with, and the creatures seemed to sense it too. They shifted uneasily, their growls turning into uncertain whimpers. She didn't take her eyes off the creatures, her grip tightening on the katana. "Leave! Now!" Her command was clear, her intent unmistakable. Kairo could see the muscles in her arm tense, ready to strike at a moment's notice. The katana seemed to pulse with energy, a silent promise of the devastation it could unleash. The creatures hesitated, their confidence wavering in the face of her unwavering resolve. The creatures hesitated, their growls turning into guttural snarls. They were caught between their instinct to attack and the palpable fear that the warrior instilled in them. Kairo could see the conflict in their eyes, the struggle to decide whether to fight or flee. It was a tense standoff, the outcome hanging in the balance. The air was thick with anticipation, every second stretching into an eternity. They circled slowly, their forms flickering as if struggling to maintain their hold on the physical realm. It was as if they were caught between two worlds, their existence tenuous and fragile. Kairo could see the strain in their movements, the effort it took for them to remain corporeal. It was a haunting sight, one that filled him with a sense of dread. He knew that if they managed to fully manifest, the battle would be far from easy. Kairo could feel a palpable wave of malice radiating from them, a tangible aura of darkness that sent shivers down his spine. It was a darkness that seemed to seep into his very soul, threatening to overwhelm him. He fought to keep his fear in check, to focus on the warrior who stood between him and the creatures. Her presence was a beacon of hope, a reminder that he was not alone in this fight. The tension stretched taut, the air crackling with anticipation. It was a moment suspended in time, a breath held in collective suspense. Kairo could feel the weight of it pressing down on him, the uncertainty of what would happen next. Every muscle in his body was coiled, ready to spring into action. He knew that whatever happened, he had to be ready. The stakes were too high, the danger too real. Kairo held his breath, his gaze darting between the girl and the creatures, his heart pounding a frantic tattoo against his ribs. He could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins, heightening his senses. Every sound, every movement was amplified, etched into his memory. He knew that this moment would be a turning point, a defining chapter in his journey. He just didn't know how it would end. He was caught in a game of cat and mouse, and he wasn't sure he wanted to know the rules. The uncertainty gnawed at him, a constant reminder of the precariousness of his situation. But he knew one thing for certain, he couldn't afford to lose. Not now, not ever. The warrior's presence gave him a sliver of hope, a belief that they could overcome the darkness together. And so, he steeled himself, ready to face whatever came next.